And welcome back again. You had seen this before when we talked about functions, and the type of function we've been building has been a void function with no parameters. Now it's time to learn a little bit about how to actually send stuff to a function so that it can do something. Uh, those things basically require us to add parameters to our function. This was the example we gave before where we had the function declared above the code. And then in the next lecture, we actually showed you how to take this and turn it into a prototype and an implementation of it. So if we want to do the same kind of thing, first I'll show you how it works above, and then we'll split it up and show you how it works with both pieces to it. Let's say we've got a function that needs to take in an integer to print a number, just to keep it simple. Doesn't have to do anything but print that number. So once again, it's a void function because it doesn't return anything. We'll call it print number. And then we actually need to tell this function what kind of parameter it's going to get. So the values that are passed into the function are actually called arguments, and the stuff inside the parentheses are called parameters. So some will call these arguments actual parameters, and some will call them formal arguments, 6-to-1. In this case, we want to pass in an integer number. So we're going to declare in our parameter list an integer and a name for it. This right here works the same exact way as if we sit down here and declare an integer number here. The difference being that here is going to be basically created and initialized with what you pass into it at the same time that we call into the function. So let's finish this function off. And there we go. So here's what happens. Let's just go ahead and give it a value to start with, 42. We'll print the header, and then we'll print the number. Now to print the number, it tells us now, thanks to the IDE, that we need to give it a number. So to call the function print number, or to call any function with a parameter, you have to pass inside the list in the same exact order that it's listed here. Right now we only have one, so that's easy. Exactly what it's asking for. So in this case, it wants an integer. We're giving it an integer. What's going to happen when this function gets called is it's going to take this function, find print number, see that it needs a number, pass a copy of the value of this number into this. So you can picture this, if you will, as the variable number right here turns into the number 42. The number 42 comes up here, and this thing says effectively something like this. It really does, okay, declare me a number for 42, put in the value of 42. Or if you want to be more abstract with it, it passes in the number. So this int num equals number is exactly what happens. It declares the num, initializes it with the value you've just passed into it, and then allows us to use it. You don't need the code here because this is wrong, but that's exactly what you get. So if you run this code, you can see, hello, I am the function. There's our void function with no parameters. The number is 42. And there's print number, a void function with a parameter of num. So our function down here, when we call it, you have to call it by name and then pass in exactly what it is you want it to do, or what you want it to have to be able to use its information. We saw this before when you saw the POW function. The POW function required two values. So the POW function was a function with actual parameters that took two different numbers to be able to do what it was going to do. We only have one right here. And you can do it via literals if you wish, or you can do it with variables. You should start thinking in terms of variables and passing things back and forth. If you wanted to, you could call this thing with all kinds of stuff. Let's say we want to call it a couple times. But we want to call it with a bigger number. And another bigger number. And another bigger number. And we run it, and we get, there you go, 42. Then we get 42 plus plus, 42 plus plus, 42 plus plus. Now, I want you to think a little bit about what's going on here with this. This is just kind of a little side tricksy thing to make your brain work. Do you all recall what the plus plus is? If you don't, pause the video and go back and look. If you do, or you have looked it up now, you will remember that the plus plus was a postfix notation of add 1 to number. And if you recall from the videos and from the book, that means take whatever the value of number is, use it, then add 1 to it. And look what happened. The first time we passed in just number, we got number as 42. The second time we passed in number plus plus. This literally comes out and says, use number, then after the function ends, add 1 to number. So this plus plus, this postfix notation says use the number, 42. See, there it is. Comes out 42. Then, as soon as you come back, remember we come back here. In this case, you can imagine the cursor blinking right there. It says use the number, and then after the function ends, add, I forgot to do add 1. Add 1 to the number. So the next time you call this function, this guy right here, line 16, it's passing a number whose value is now, 43. And then it passes it in again, and then, it's 44. And as a matter of fact, if we call print number again with number, take a guess at what you think it might be. And sure enough, 45. So this is postfix notation. Now, what happens if you do prefix notation? This is kind of going back to old stuff. If you have prefix notation, you're going to get the math first, add 1 to the number, and then use the number. Watch. We had 42. We printed 42. We then said plus plus number. Now we have 43. We said plus plus number, 44. Plus plus number, 45. And then we ended with 45. So this is where postfix and prefix notation can oftentimes get into a problem with people, is they forget that the order of how you use things really, really matters in this. This is add, then use. The other way was use, then add. Just another exciting thing to do with numbers and mathematics in C++. But now you see we've got our function written. It works up here, but once again, we don't do this anymore. We prototype on the top and we implement below. So let's move our implementation. And we'll put it down here. And then we need to do a prototype up here of our void print number. And inside our print number, we actually have an integer and a number. This right here is the actual declaration of the variable number. Up here, this is just a promise that we're going to have a function called print number, and it's going to take certain types of things, not by name, but by type. So the way that you do a prototype is you put the type of the variable inside the brackets, but you don't put the name in. Now, some people now are starting to put the names up here. If you do put the name up here, if you do put num up here, the compiler ignores this one. It doesn't have any impact whatsoever. So let's say you did something like int nums. Down here you have int num. That nums does not exist. So we want to look at it just as a prototype function that says, I promise you there's a function called print number. I promise you it'll take an integer. And then when you go down to the actual implementation, now is where you put the actual variable. And once again, it takes this number, copies it, passes it over to this guy. And that's how a basic parameter set on a function works. Hope you have a great day.